Trent Murphy, thanks for jumping on, brother.
Yeah, happy to be here. I know we've been talking for a while, so I appreciate your patience with me.
Well, you got a newborn, man. It's hard to chase down guys that have newborns.
Absolutely. Well, sleep's not a thing anymore.
No, definitely not. So I know we kind of talked about this a little bit ahead of time, but there's a lot of guys that have had you on to talk about hunting, and we'll get to some of that stuff. But I've had a lot of people really want to hear more on the football end just because of my background in coaching. And so I'm trying to get, more guys on with a background in football. And obviously you did, 7 years in the NFL, standout, All-American at Stanford. So I appreciate you jumping on and us being able to talk some ball here.
Yeah, no, I mean, football is my first language, so it's the easiest thing to talk about. So it doesn't take a lot of preparation on my end to go back. So I had a kind of battle with the memory here and there, but other than
that, yeah. Just real quick, I mean, can you give people just the trajectory from where you grew up, where you went to high school? You told me a pretty cool story when we were chatting the other day about, ASU trying to get you, but ultimately why you went to Stanford. Just give us a little bit of background, high school to college.
Yeah, for sure. I went to a Jesuit high school called Brophy Prep in Phoenix. I think we went to state 3 out of 4 years in high school, and then was recruited out of Brophy by Coach Jim Harbaugh, the one and only, to Stanford. Dennis Eric was at ASU at the time. He tried really, really hard to keep the talent in state.
Were they good when he was there at ASU? Was it when Erickson was there? How were they?
Competitive. They were like at the tail end of it. They had some really good years. He was there for a long time. And my sister was on the basketball team there, so it would have been cool to have an overlap year with her in athletics. With Charlie Turner, she's a all-time women's basketball coach. But
in high school, what did y'all run? Were you a 4-3 team, an odd front? What did y'all run in high school?
We were a 4-3 team. Slant right, slant left, pretty much. We run some games, but very, very simple defense. Hand was always in the dirt. So
that's what I was going to ask you. Were you playing with your hand in the ground, or were you like a Sam linebacker or something?
No, always in the track stance. When we finally had Vic Fangio come into Stanford and made that switch to basically the Niners defense, and some of us had to stand up, some of us had to go inside. It was like fish out of water for a minute. Standing up at 6'6" on the edge, I was like, "What the fuck am I doing?"
That's a whole different world. And I want to pursue that in just a minute. But when you talked about getting recruited to Stanford, and at this time, Harbaugh has been in a lot of different places, since you were coming out of high school. But I had a kid that I coached just in the last few years that went to Michigan for Harbaugh, and I know what kind of a recruiter he is. But for people that, kind of just see the TV Harbaugh, talk a little bit about what he did on the recruiting trail for you that really, like you said, your sister's playing volleyball at ASU. It would have been easy for you to stay there. What did he do to entice you up to Stanford?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of 7 kids. No one has ever left the state, mind you. And I'm the first one to think about leaving. And he kind of had my number from the get-go. We played Bishop Gorman in the seasoning opener. That was like a powerhouse. It was like, these guys in high school are covered in tattoos. They all look like they were 35, and we're supposed to just get absolutely crushed by these guys. And we end up winning and had a huge game, makes like national headlines, whatever. He calls and like is pretty much pedal to the metal at that point. And he's like, "Listen, I'm trying to find the toughest players across the country to change this program." He's like, "I already got a defensive end out of Wisconsin and a defensive end out of Texas. And to be honest, like, I'm not sure you're tougher than either of these guys." And he's like, and to top that, like, your grades are average. Like, I'm not even sure you can do academics at Stanford either. And in my mind, as like a, testosterone driven teenager, I'm like, man, forget this guy. Like, I'm going to show him. He thinks he's got somebody tougher than me. Like, that's a joke.
So he's pretty much like like when you're elk hunting, he's the guy with the bugle challenge.
For sure.
Right? He like literally he knew you were like,
Yeah, he could
Like a
sell.
rutted up bull, basically, right? I mean, he challenged everything that triggered you, and you were like, "Hell yes, I'm going to show him." Right?
Yeah, I was like, okay, we'll see about that. Yeah, no, he could sell ice to an Eskimo, and he does it in a really personable way. Like I told you this on the phone, we got married a few years ago and invited probably 10 coaches or so to the wedding, and he's one of two guys to show up, and that's years removed. Like he couldn't be busier at Michigan at the time, probably just finished season, like either needs a vacation or in recruiting, and he flies down to Texas to come to our wedding. Like just cares a lot about his players. Like will always respond to a text, and not a lot of people see that side of him. So I like to mention it because he's been good to me. He's been supportive of my family and stuff, and so he's I think he's a good one. I mean, he's a little rough around the edges sometimes, but he does a good job with his guys.
Yeah, that was my experience with him as well. When that kid I was coaching got recruited, he came down and did his in school visit, and I mean, obviously he's all over the country, right, doing national visits. But I think he was at our school for 3 hours.
Yeah,
And obviously went to practice and then kind of hung out a little bit afterwards. But he was never, I coached college ball for 8 years, but I've, coached high school ball for over 20. Had a lot of kids get recruited and play. And you always had, guys were going to a million different visits and they
yeah,
always kind of get a little itchy and get ready to get out of there. He seemed like he could be there forever. Like he
yeah,
makes you feel like you're the only guy in the room. He's got that talent.
for sure. I think he's one of the best that way. Being intentional, being present, like trying to win whatever that play is right now and keep guys on task. And it's like the next kid will be there when he gets there. And to your point, like, I mean, and that's just a good football philosophy. Like you can't be distracted when you got a guy lined up in front of you thinking about the next play or something. So that shit translates to me.
Yeah. So you went to Stanford. What year what was your freshman year at Stanford?
I graduated 09, so 10 would have been my freshman year to like 14. Andrew Luck's class was a year ahead of me. Played like Toby Gerhart would have been a fifth year senior, my red shirt year. Um, yeah, and I mean that squad was just stacked. Like every one of those tight ends played in the NFL. All those coaches are coaching in the NFL. We got guys like David DeCastro pulling guard, and I mean Blake Martinez middle linebacker, Richard Sherman, Zach Ertz, Kobe Fleener. So it was. I mean, the list goes on,
Yeah.
but
And that's back when Stanford was competing nationally. That was, obviously if you're younger right now or have played attention to college football for the last 5 or 6 years, Stanford hasn't really been in the mix. But back then, they were in the top 10 every year.
yeah, and as far as I mean, I know it's a different game now, but even as far as like decisions to go to Stanford, yeah, he presented a challenge to me, and they weren't good. Like my red shirt year, we went to the Sun Bowl, and like that was maybe the first or second bowl game in years. But even before that success, like statistically in the Pac-10, Pac-12, while it existed, they were sending. I mean, they were like top three in the Pac-12 was sending guys to the NFL every year, and so I just saw that something at Stanford was translating. And I think what it was that like coaches like smart professional players because they can learn the playbook. They're going to do what they're told, be on time, like be accountable. And I think a lot of that stuff translated. And most of those guys historically were offensive guys, but you were starting to see more defensive guys go from Stanford. And I wasn't too worried about that. I mean, Harbaugh promised like that winning and success was coming, and it felt like it was, but there was no way to confirm that. I just knew where my goals were ultimately, and that between walking away with a Stanford degree and being in like the high statistics to go to the NFL, like it was a good choice.
Yeah. So you played at Stanford, and was Harbaugh there the whole 5 years you were there?
Just the first two. We did the Sun Bowl and the Orange Bowl with him, and then he went to the 49ers.
And then Shaw got the job.
Took over, yeah.
Yeah. So you had two coaches in college, and then I'm not sure how many coaches you you had while you were with Washington and Buffalo. But talk a little bit about what did Harbaugh do that made him different, that makes him different, that allows him to create a winning program everywhere he goes? Because there's nowhere he goes that he doesn't win.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things. One he does really well is he brings in help. And so he brings in guys, I think, that he trusts. And he also has the ability to demand the most out of these guys. But like, starts with the strength coach, right? Everywhere he goes, he has a really good strength coach. And I think he recognizes that those guys spend more time with the players and even their own position coaches a lot of the season. I mean, all off season, etc. And they lay a huge foundation. They do? I don't know if this is something he talks about with them or not, but he does like a lot. His strength coaches always seem to do a lot of mental adversity work with the guys, and kind of like incorporate that in the training as far as like starting over and stuff like that if they're not locked in or sloppy, and learning accountability kind of throughout the workouts. I mean, he always has good play callers, good playbooks. I mean, good position coaches. And then he goes after, at least at Stanford, his recipe was to go after like the 3-star gritty players that were overlooked by some of the bigger schools, but had the talent and were maybe late bloomers or just didn't have the numbers or whatever, but didn't have the Alabama offers per se. That might have been different at Michigan, but yeah. And then it's just a process from there. I mean, he talks about the process a lot, like set the goals and then forget them. And then how are we working every day to achieve those goals? And it's so simple, but it gets lost. And some guys talk about it, but they can't really execute it. And I think he's done it enough times now that he gets the buy-in from people to execute and stay the course of the process, kind of even as the doubters and cynics start to murmur along the way.
So when you went into Stanford, you went in with your hand on the ground as a defensive end.
Yeah.
What did your arc look like that in terms of, did you redshirt as a freshman? When did you start getting significant playing time? What was the first year you started? What did all that look like?
Yeah, I redshirted from a freshman for sure. I was super skinny, super long, needed a little development in the trenches. I also
What did you weigh coming out of high school?
I mean, I told him I weighed 235, but I think I showed up at like 195, 205.
You were 6'6"?
Yeah.
Out of high school?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how much weight did they put on you between your fall of your freshman year and the fall of your second year?
I probably like very quickly got to like 237, 235, and then it was like 10-pound jumps a year from there.
Yeah.
I probably finished at 260.
Did you know Jonathan Abraham? Did you ever get to know him at all or not?
No.
He played at Carolina, and I was at Carolina when he may have been, I think he was still in the league when you were in, but I remember going to see him at Lamar High School as a senior, and he was a lot like what you just said. You know, he was on their state. He was a state high hurdle, like second in the state in high hurdles. He was like 6'5".
Yeah.
I think he was $190.
Yeah.
And at the end of his freshman year, he was like 240.
Yeah.
So yeah, they can put weight on you
for sure.
So you redshirt your freshman year. What did your second year look like?
The second year, I was getting some play time. I ended up breaking my foot early, very early that season. Actually, one of my own teammates, he was a giant Samoan human being.
Those dudes, man.
Yeah,
those guys are built different.
Yeah, they're for absolute just wrecking balls. But he like heel stomped the middle of my foot, and it inflamed, and about a week later it popped and broke like it was a Liz Frank injury actually. And then so we flew down to UCLA, and that popped in that game, and had to fly back with no pain meds because they couldn't give them, of course, down there. And then show up the next morning, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you have a Liz Frank tore and a broken bone."
Thanks, by the way.
Yeah. And so sat out that year. too. Technically I was eligible for a medical red shirt. I never took it because 6 years was way too long to be there. And so yeah, and then I just came back kind of hungry and stacked 3 seasons together. I think the next year I started, and we had like 5 or 7 sacks or something, and then my redshirt junior year I had 10, and everybody said I should leave because it was not repeatable for me. And then I came back my senior year and led the NCAA in sacks with 15. And I could have came back another year after that with that medical, but which would have been cool to do just from like a ego standpoint of like holding some Stanford records. But I needed to move on.
What was the decision between coming after your junior year, you've got 10 sacks. What was the decision to stay? Did you feel like just staying was going to help your draft status, or were there other things that were coming into play in that decision to come back another year?
Yeah, I felt like it helped my draft status. I knew there was a lot of like unfinished business a little bit. I forget what we finished that season with, but we had a really good group of seniors. I think we had like 10 returning seniors that were all like, "What are we doing, guys?" And everyone was like, "We're coming back. Let's do it again, do it our way." And so there was definitely some camaraderie involved of groupthink a little bit. I knew I had more in the tank. I think I submitted my draft grade and it said like 4th or 5th round or something. And I actually found this email the other day. I took out like an insurance policy for injury based on that grade. And as a college kid, I had to take out like a $12,000, $13,000 loan to pay the insurance policy, which like I think was like $1 million or $2 million in case I had like a career-ending injury that senior year. That matched what that draft stock potentially like career earnings could be or something. So I'd had a little insurance policy. I think those things are really hard to cash in on, but yeah, I don't know. I was committed to doing it again with those guys.
So just from were you still? I know that he left after the second year, and you mentioned earlier that Vic Fangio came in, and you went to an odd front when he came in, right?
Yeah.
And you were standing up. So did you get those 15, like that 10 sack season, that 15 sack season? Were you playing standing up when you were doing that? Or did you still have your hand on the, like, were you playing like a 5 technique defensive end in that odd front, or have you playing outside backer?
Yes and no. So we were a 3-4 base, right? But we played Oregon every year and all the Oregon lookalike spread offenses with the zone option. So we end up in a nickel front most of the game anyway. Like, yes, we were a 3-4 base, but that being said, we probably ran 4-3 70% of the games anyway.
Just because of what they were giving you.
Because of what they were giving us. And so it was, they were all right out of a 3-4 base, and some of those sacks were probably standing up. But I think when I like look over that highlight reel from those 2 years, like my hand was started in the ground out of a nickel package most of the time, which because we would have been most time in like second or third and longs anyway. And so we would have probably been in a sub package for that. So I do think those were probably like 5-9 techniques hand in the ground most of the time. But that being said, some of it was out of the stand up.
Gotcha. Okay. And so for people who, 9 technique is an outside shade on the tight end, 5 technique is an outside shade on the offensive tackle, just so people know what we're talking about. What was I know you had 10 sacks your junior year, 15 your senior year. What was your best move? Like, were you, you weren't just a pure speed rusher. I know you were good off the edge, but like what did you rely on the most? And what was the most effective for you in terms of, how you set up the offensive tackle throughout the course of the game, and then, where did most of your sacks come from just from a technique standpoint?
Back then, especially my senior year, it was honestly just a double side scissors, hand swipe, and then a spin move, and I would set them up to look very similar.
Tell people what that means.
So side scissors is just basically you're matching his hand. So you want to get your face as close as possible to the offensive lineman, and your chest is close because then they can't recover after they punch. But you're essentially just timing up the punch. So as you get close to them, most college kids are double hand punching. They're not really flashing. And then you're just matching side scissor and getting his hands off of you. And then as you're kind of passing him, and then you follow with a rip so he can't turn around and give you a shove or hang on to you. And then that's essentially like a modified speed rush. And then you're showing that same move for the spin. And so that would be like the counter move off of it, but you could do it off of like a post chop look too. But basically, you'd be rushing the upfield shoulder, getting him to set deeper. And kind of as you're getting parallel or a step past his hip, you would kind of throw your hands upfield and get him to turn his shoulders and then load off your inside leg. And then you're throwing your outside elbow, outside leg, and trying to cover as much ground as possible and land with your outside elbow on his inside shoulder and basically hammer him kind of where his momentum is traveling upfield anyway. It's a beautiful move when it's done right, for sure. It's super flashy and makes for a great highlight. You just have to make sure you're deep enough, because if you do it too early, you'll kind of lose contain, right? There's nothing to piss off an entire coaching staff quicker than deep losing contain and letting especially a mobile quarterback, get outside of the pocket and extend the play.
Yeah, because as the defensive end, especially in an in an even front, your job is you've got to set the edge, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that you can't allow anything to get outside of you because there's no one else, to protect the outside or take care of the outside. So you've got to get that tackle set out wide enough that when you spin back in, you've still got contain. You can still maintain contain, is what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, typically for a guy my size, they would have like a really good kind of like a long arm in their repertoire as well. But what a lot of people didn't know my senior year is I had such bad wrist injuries that I couldn't punch anymore. And so then I started leading with my head for like a change-up bull rush. And then I started getting stingers. And those stingers were too bad to hit people with my head anymore. So pretty much none of my opponents knew that I legitimately couldn't strike them with my hands or my head. And so it just turned into side scissors and spins all the time, which it worked out. But had they known that they didn't have to sit for power, it probably could have ended a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. So you had a great college career. You decided to come back your senior year. Your projected draft status was 4 or 5 coming out your junior year. So then after the end of your senior year, what were you getting from a projection going into the draft?
Pretty much like 1 or 2 going into the draft.
And who was showing the most interest, as you went into draft day? Like, where did you, and I know you never know for sure, like you never know where you're going to hang, but there's always usually a handful of teams that you think, okay, I'm probably going to end up, somewhere in here based upon your draft projection, all that kind of stuff. What were you thinking going into draft day?
I was thinking probably Detroit or Seattle. I had played really well against Pete Carroll while he was at USC, and then Washington State and UW. They could pick a game each season to play in the Seahawks Stadium. And each time we played there my senior year, I had a screen pick 6 and took to the house. And kind of like as the phone rang, Seattle was the next pick in the draft board. And Detroit had spent a lot of time with me going into everything.
You went in the second round, correct? I think pick 47 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. And did it surprise you that you went to the second round, or was it kind of like not really sure?
It didn't surprise me necessarily that I went to the second round. It surprised me that some of the edge rushers that got taken before me, especially because some of them were from the Pac-12, and I was like, this fucking guy. But
and how did those guys end up panning out in the league? Like, did any of the guys that went before you, did any of them have like great careers or not?
Not really. One of them had a long career, but he actually, I think two out of the three of the guys ended up getting moved to middle linebackers, and then had solid careers at middle backer, which is a very strange transition to go from like an edge guy to just being
Yeah,
off,
it really is.
off in space like that for that long.
Yeah.
But they made it work. Made it work for sure.
So you went to Washington, right?
Yeah.
Tell people just a little bit about what the combine was like and what the draft process was like. Obviously, it's a little more transparent now because you can see it on TV, but just from the perspective of going through it as a player,
for sure,
leading up to it, all that stuff.
It's transparent, but it's still, in my opinion, like misperceived a little bit because they televise a third day, right? Which is the physical day, which is what everyone wants to see and all the hype.
Yeah, all the testing and everything. Mm-hmm.
But that being said, you spend 3 to 5 hours on the physical portion on the last day of a 3-day combine. And in my mind, like, at least is what I tell players prepping for it. Like, if the physical was the most important part of the evaluation, they would spend 2.5 days on the physical and a half day on character and mental evaluations.
Right.
But they spend 2.5 days on mental and character evaluations trying to get to know guys and less than half a day on the physical. And that's the televised part, of course. But that being said, I think it would be reversed if that were the case. And so I definitely made money at the combine outside of the 40. I didn't perform great on that, but the rest of the stuff I did great, and I crushed all the interviews. I mean, they ask you ridiculous questions and they want to know.
What were a couple of the most ridiculous questions you got asked?
Probably the dumbest question I got asked from the Browns scout, and he pulls out an iPad to like try and make you nervous. And he's like, okay, you have 60 seconds or 90 seconds. I'm going to film you. Please list all the things of you can use a brick for. and like, just for what, really? But I don't know. I don't know if it's humor for them back in the office or what, or if they just want to watch guys think on their feet or fall apart on camera trying to describe what they could use a brick for. But that's one of the sillier questions, and that guy was doing that the whole combine for multiple years. I've heard other players say that too. And then, I mean, they'll challenge.
Maybe that's why the Browns are terrible every year. They can't find anybody that knows what to do with a brick.
No one can use a brick. But you walk into a room, it's full of all the big names of the staff, the coordinators, head coach, and I was prepped well because my agents had helped me put together a binder with pictures and names of everyone. And so before I'd go see a team, I could do a quick run through and be like, okay, like, here's the decision makers. Here would be my position coach. So you kind of know like who to address. And if they got some scout that's their bulldog or whatever, you're not addressing him like he's the owner of the team the entire meeting, when really the decision makers are on the other side of the room and you blow off their question or something.
You mentioned earlier that one of the things that you liked about Harbaugh when he was recruiting you, just because you knew he had a background in the NFL and some of the prep stuff, you talked about how important it is from an NFL standpoint that they're finding guys that are pros.
Yeah, for
right.
Sure.
So what is that? Because I'm assuming this is a huge part of what this 2-day, pre-physical process is they're trying to figure out who's going to be a good pro. So, you spent 7 years in the league. What does that mean, being a good pro? What are they looking for?
I mean, first and foremost, I think not a lot of guys talk about this, but someone with the ability to handle stress and high stress situations. I mean, if a team that, loses a few games in the NFL and then has to show up for work, and everyone's talking about how the ship is burning and fire everybody or this, that, and everyone's sphincters are tightening up coming into the facility about who's going to be the scapegoat or who's going to lose their job. And you can push that stress aside and lock in on the details of what your job are. Show up early, like be prepared to do your job that day, not have any MEs or mental errors, and basically execute your job even on the worst day in a professional manner, and be somebody that coach isn't dreading having to coach and sit in a meeting and put your tape up and go through the practice or the game. And everyone's likes to work with everyone because the season gets long, right? And whether it's a good season or a bad season, like, you guys got to ride it out together in the most professional manner possible. And taking it a step further, like, somebody you want to be sitting in that room with and enjoy working with, and brings energy and brings that juice, and isn't going to bitch and moan if the offense throws a pick and you got to run out before you catch your breath. And it's the difference between running onto the field after offense throws an interception of, hey, you guys got it next time, we got your back, don't worry about it, and being like, are you guys fucking retarded? How could you throw another pick right now? And, like, we're never going to win a game because of you. And I've had guys run onto a field saying that to the offense as they're coming off the field. And so, like, it sounds great and obvious to not do that, but at the same time, like, those are some of the personality shit they're trying to weed out. And so it's like, if it's hot, if it's cold, like, yeah, your helmet's frozen and you still got to put this brick on and run out there and go do a goal line stand. Or if you're flying down to Florida and, everyone's dehydrated and having heat stroke and have to do a 2-minute drill, like, who's got the toughness and character to be able to get the call, know their job, like, correct their teammates, echo the call down the line. And so that's kind of a long-winded answer of what a pro is. But to me, it's like effort and just showing up on time. Like, that's the bare minimum. So kind of going above and beyond to do your job better than anybody else in the building, and better than anybody that they can find on the street that can do your job. And then, like, have the grit to play through a couple injuries and stay on the field. Like, to me, that's kind of all encompassing of what a pro is and how to keep your job in the NFL. There's a lot to that, but that just gives you an idea at least.
Mm-hmm. So as a rookie with Washington, when you hit the building for camp, was there like what was your welcome to the NFL moment? What was the moment like where you were kind of like, oh, this is different than college? Do you remember something specifically like that resonated?
Sure. There were probably a couple things, but the most, I guess, obvious one is that I thought none of my moves in the NFL worked and I was going to have to reinvent the wheel. But I didn't realize none of my moves worked because I had to go against Trent Williams every day in practice.
Like, dude, that guy is a stud.
Yeah,
man.
I mean, just all-time great. Like, there's no one better than him at that position.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little humbling as a rookie for sure to go against him every day, but made me.
How many years had he been there when you came in?
Oh, fuck, I don't know. He was probably going into like year 8 by then.
Yeah, he was like a veteran. So, yeah.
At least.
So that was it, having to play against Trent in practice? That was your like, oh, I'm here. This is a different deal? Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of like NFL things outside of football for sure too, but that was probably my biggest hurdle to get over. It was like, all right, like, their first pick in the draft, I can't lay an egg every day against this guy. Like, I got to figure something out here. And so I had to get creative and change up my angle and alignments and do some new studying and stuff. And I mean, it made me way better. I think by my third year, I was rolling and got 9 sacks. And then my fourth year, when I could actually give him a run for his money, I was gonna have the best year, and that's when I blew out my knee in preseason. But yeah, shoulda, woulda, coulda now.
So who was the best offensive lineman you ever lined up against?
Trent Williams.
Was it him?
Yeah,
it was. Yeah. So you played the best guy you ever played against. You had to play against in practice.
Yeah.
Well, that'll make you a pretty good player on game day.
Yeah. No, they were for sure. I mean, Tyron Smith in his heyday was really good too in Dallas. He had just some meat paws on him if he grabbed you, and you could tell he took physical fitness very seriously. Trying to think who else. Philly had a couple good guys, but I mean, compared to Trent, he was just, I mean, like a 350-pound dude that considered himself like a finesse player, a feet guy, and usually once guys are getting up that big, like they're more of just like a brute, right?
That's what I was going to ask you about. What did he do that made him so good? And when you say he was a feet player, like obviously as a line guy, I know what that means. But talk a little bit, about when you talk about a guy who's a feet player who's not, versus one who's not a feet player. What does that mean?
Right. Yeah. So I would say like, I don't know if you could break if a line would like this, but I'd just break it into two categories. Like you got a feet player that like is just kind of going to stay in the way of you. Like no matter what move you throw, he's going to be like he's super light on his feet, and he was always going to be square and in front of you, and can kind of shuffle and always be in the way of your move. And then he's just kind of holding on for dear life, hoping the quarterback throws a ball before you drive him back into the quarterback's lap. And then you kind of have like those maulers that are throwing real heavy hands or flashing their hands, like trying to jab you kind of in the chin, right, like in your face mask without getting the hands to the face call. And they're probably like jump setting you but they're big enough that like if they get a couple good hits on you, like it throws your entire like momentum off. And then same thing, they're just kind of mauling you from there. And those guys are guys you're like throwing finesse moves and running around, and like you don't want to bull rush those guys every play because they're just too fucking big. They can take it no problem. Whereas like a guy that's a really light on his feet and can shuffle anywhere, like yeah, you just run through his face all day, and eventually he's going to start sitting a little harder on you. And Trent was kind of an odd commodity that way because he weighs 350 pounds. He runs a 4.7 40, but he's like the strongest guy in the weight room. So it's like, do you want to run through that guy? Not really, but we ran the same 40 times. So how am I supposed to run around him?
He was a freak, man.
Yeah, but I mean, he was beatable for sure. He just had to be a little bit more creative with him, for sure.
So, what's something that the average, fan, people who watch the NFL every Sunday and maybe even kind of religious about it, right? They're watching the draft, they're watching everything, and they think they get the NFL. What's something that they think they understand that they're totally off on?
Let's see. I can probably find a better answer, but I would say fine money for sure. Nobody really understands. Even players don't understand it. Like no one knows where the fine money goes to. Players just get fined, and it gets taken directly out of their check before it comes in, and then it moves on. I would say the tax side of things, like they see these gigantic contracts and don't calculate that 51% of it goes to taxes, like 3% of it goes to agent fees. Then you have to pay union dues. You have off-season training that's non-tax write-off. Like all the medical stuff is a non-tax write-off. And so I would say that's like the most misconstrued concept is like, oh, like they got this contract, they're set for life. And it's like, well, they made their life's earnings before they were 27, right? So like if you divide the contract they got after taxes versus the amount of years or months that they have left to live, like most of the time it equals like a normal salary. And so I always think that's interesting to point out to people just because it gives them a little bit more like, oh, okay, like they're laying their bodies on the line to make this shit stretch for the rest of their lives, and like they're not, by the time they do what they got to do, it's not as crazy as it sounds on paper.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense because I don't think anyone ever thinks about the tax consequences of that money. Because when you're getting paid at that high of a level, you're getting taxed at a higher tax bracket. And like you said, they're not thinking about the agent fees. They just see the number at the top.
Yeah.
and that's kind of where they focus on everything. What was the position like? Or was there a significant difference in the position room? Right. So, for the average listener, there's a position room for every position on a team. Like there's your defensive
Yeah.
line coach, your linebacker coach. So, and then those guys are all in the film room watching their tape from practice, watching their tape from the game. Was there a big difference in the way that your position room was run and handled in the NFL versus college or not?
I was lucky being at Stanford. I think Stanford very much runs their, at least back then. I can't say what they're doing now. I mean, they would be doing it now with Andrew there. It was very much ran like a professional organization. So I would say there wasn't a huge change. Probably more time, right? In the NFL, you're not taking classes anymore. I'd send the schedule out to some friends or something just so they can be like look at it and find the humor in the schedule. But I think people would be surprised with probably how long the day is and how spelled out it is and how many times we meet and watch tape of the same thing or it's very redundant, right? We meet, we talk about what we're going to do, we watch what we're going to do from maybe a previous year, a previous game, and we walk through what we just talked about that we're going to do. Then we break, have lifting, lunch, whatever, come back for practice, go out and do it, and go back and meet and watch what we just did and see if it's what we said we were going to do. And then kind of either watch, game tape or a cut up or highlight, quickly go over what we're going to do tomorrow just to hit it one more time. And so from like the professional standpoint, I don't know if that surprises people or not, but there is a lot of time talking and watching what we're going to do, doing it and going back and rewatching what we just did. Yeah.
And so for people that, like you said, you'd send that schedule out and people would be a little bit surprised. I mean, you don't have to break down every piece of it, but on average, like what time did the day start? When did you have to be in your first meeting? And when did you finally leave the facility on an average,
Yeah.
day?
First meeting's probably around 7 a.m. And that doesn't account for any guys that have bumps and bruises that are required to do treatment. So you'd have to show up probably at 6 a.m. so you can get 45 minutes of treatment in before the first meeting. And then you're probably in, I would say, your first defensive meeting. I mean, usually opens with like a quick indie meeting to get a head start. And then around like 7:30, you got a team meeting, which can be brief, like just to let the head coach talk and either send a message or, usually like your more fluffy stuff of like team character stuff of who we are, what we want to be. Then you break up into O and D. So then the coordinators have everybody and kind of go over the big picture stuff or same thing, like, especially training camp, he'll hit those fundamental principles for the new guys of this is who we are, this is what we do, this is how we do it. And then we'll hit the general concepts probably until like 9 o'clock and then break up into position meetings. And those guys will kind of go over it with a fine tooth. And then, yeah. And then by the time you get done with that, it'll probably be like 11, break up for got 15 minutes to change and put cleats and jerseys on, come out for a walkthrough. Um, then that'll probably get done 12:30, 1 o'clock, you're into lunch. And most of the time after lunch, then everyone's back getting taped and ready for practice and go out for like a 2-hour practice and then come back in and some guys can sneak a lift in there. But most of the time we'll break up straight into O and D meetings for like an hour, probably get done with the day like, I don't know, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Some teams provide dinner, some teams don't. So by the time you get done, you pretty much gotta start getting ready to do it again the next day at 6 a.m.
So you're looking at a 10, 11 hour day for
Yeah.
most people, at
Yeah,
least.
for
Some
sure.
maybe 12 if you got to get treatment and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were talking about, I think it was your third season at Washington. You had 9 sacks. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you said that your fourth, you kind of were really feeling like you were hitting your stride. That was going to be your best season in the NFL. And then you blew your knee out in preseason, right?
Yeah.
What did you have, an ACL tear, or what did you have?
Yeah. I had a ACL, MCL, and meniscus, and my left knee.
And so how did that happen? Was that like a planting injury, or did somebody fall on it, or like how did that one happen?
Yeah, it was a hodgepodge of bullshit, pretty much. But we had a couple injuries, so we were light in guys. So I had to play a few extra reps with guys maybe a little lower on the totem pole, which things get a little crazier then. And they had a fullback. I forget who we were playing. Oh, I think we were playing in Baltimore. Maybe they had a fullback playing running back because they didn't have enough bodies. And then we had an inside linebacker fill the B gap and just absolutely crush this guy, which you can't blame him for, but he crushed him into my knee. And so I was just setting an edge kind of planted with both my legs, like kind of planted out and fairly straight and just kind of letting everything get washed into me. And then those two guys met in the B gap and he depleted them. So it was like oblique pretty much my knee while I was planted. So everything just kind of caved in.
Did you know immediately?
Yeah, I was fucked. Everything popped. I mean, I stood up and walked off, but I was like, it's toast. Like, that's all right.
Yeah. Hey guys, big thanks to Osseo Gear for supporting the show. Osseo is built specifically for bow hunters. Every stitch, zipper, and fabric choice is made to perform when it's quiet and the pressure's on. Their camo patterns are inspired by nature's predators, and they're purpose-built to ensure you blend naturally into the specific environment you are hunting. Make sure to use the code DO NOT GO20 to get 20% off on your purchases at OsseoGear.com. Osseo is made for bow hunters by bow hunters. So give them a check. They're a big supporter of the podcast, and we appreciate them. Great gear. So talk a little bit about, you told me that story about rehab, and, this is kind of how you ended up, which, hunting is really your thing right like now that you're postseason outside of your family. But talk a little bit about your rehab, with Washington, and kind of how you ended up in the woods, and really starting to fall in love with hunting, from that injury, essentially.
For sure. So it was like an intersection of a lot of different points. The strength industry people will appreciate this, but I'd met with Charles Poliquin after my second year, maybe, because I just kind of was having some like fatigue, energy issues a little bit, and he had his fat caliper test that he ran, and I mean, he'd done it on so many people. He knew kind of right away, but he basically said like, you're not recovering enough. Probably all your keyholes are filled with plastic and bullshit. Like you got to change what you think is healthy and where you're sourcing your food from, and what you're cooking in your deodorants, all that stuff. Like, and so I kind of turned into like the bubble boy for a while, chasing all these like more healthy options of household items and food items and everything. And then fast forward to that year, get put on IR. I mean, we have like a record high, over 25 guys, I think, on IR that year. And so they were understaffed and had too many players. And they basically said, like, hey, if you can do treatment elsewhere and you're not expected to be back before the end of the season, please do that, because we don't have enough hands to go around for the guys that are going to be playing in, 3, 6, 8 games or whatever, which is very rare. Like usually in the NFL, they want, to be babysitting you full time, never leaving. Like they're watching you, you're going to meetings, but it was contract year for me, was expected to be back there. They couldn't really treat me most of the time anyway. And so they set me up with like a physical therapist I could do on my own. And so all of a sudden, like I have this fall that's just open. I'm kind of reliving that conversation with Poliquin of like, man, I need to get some wild game meat. Matthews was still doing the bows for pros deal for players back then. So I ordered a bow. Didn't know what to order.
What was bows for pros?
they basically had a deal. I don't remember if it was 50% off or if they would just give you a free bow a year. But like if you were a pro athlete and you wanted to rep Matthews, they would send you a free bow.
Gotcha.
And so I was like, well, I'm going to try that. And it was the tail end of it, but they kind of let me squeak through and sent a bow out. Man, I had no idea what I was doing. They were asking me all these questions, and I was like, I don't know what draw length I am. Like, what does it matter? And so they ended up sending me like
just out of curiosity. I know you're long. What is your draw length?
It's 34, and they sent me a 27.
They sent you a 27-inch draw.
Yeah,
you're like this.
Yeah, and so this thing. I mean, I go to Dick's Sporting Goods and put a whisker biscuit on it and a sight. And on crutches post surgery, like shooting a 3D target in like a very suburban neighborhood. And I just am like, all right, well, I'm gonna go hunt. Like I'm gonna figure this out. And so
now you didn't grow up. Your dad didn't hunt, right? You didn't grow up around, or did you grow up around hunting? What was that? What did that look like as a and I know it's hard as a football player to be a hunter because it's always happening during the season. But what did that look like growing up?
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in Arizona in the desert, like clay pigeon shooting in the desert a ton. That's a big scene out there. We'd shoot the occasional jackrabbit or something. We'd bass fish and clean those. And then we went elk hunting like twice growing up, but didn't get anything. So like growing up, I had never seen, an animal field dressed by somebody. Had experience camping, like walking around with a gun with my dad. But outside of that, like pretty green, very green.
Okay.
Especially never whitetail hunted. So like me getting this bow and walking around the woods, like it was a steep learning curve. But
and how far out from your injury are you out? Like you jacked your knee up, and I would imagine it's August because you're in preseason, right? Yeah. So how long until you got the bow in your hand and you're out there trying to figure it out?
I mean, I'm out there in October, so whatever that is, like
a couple of months.
Yeah, like enough to still be in a knee brace and.
And you were hunting off the ground, right? You weren't trying to get up a tree stand or anything. So what did that first season, out look like for you?
Oh, it was rough. I mean, but I learned a ton. Like I had time and I had like a lot of thirst to learn and to get this done. And I mean, I'd been in nature before, so I wasn't like totally unable to process what was happening. But like the first time I found a ground scrape, like I had no fucking clue what it was. I was like, what is clearing all the leaves right here? Or like,
did you have anybody that you had that you could kind of bounce things off of, or anybody that mentored you in it, or were you literally just trying to figure out on your own between what you were seeing and YouTube University?
Just YouTube University and what I was seeing. I did one night. I mean, it was a long drive down there. I was probably driving like 3 hours to this wildlife management area in Virginia. And I sat. It was hard as hell because I kept walking further and further back to get away from people in this public parking lot, and was sitting in spots and starting to see stuff in the distance. And I'd kind of have to like muster enough strength to limp back to the truck because I was like probably, I don't know, walking 4 miles back, which on a bum knee was a lot back then.
It's a lot now. There's not many guys hunting whitetail that are going 4 miles in, man.
Fair enough. And it was so late when I was walking out, moving the pace I was moving and sitting as long as I did till I like couldn't see my hand in front of my face anymore, that there was a houndsman coon hunting coming in. And he was kind of taken back because like these are his woods that he hunts all the time and runs dogs in, and which also probably hurt the deer. But he was like, "Oh man, what the hell are you doing out here still?" I was like, "Oh, I was deer hunting." He was like, "Deer hunting? It's 9:30, 10 o'clock. What are you deer hunting?" And I was like, I'm just walking out, man. Like, I don't know. It just took me a while to get out. He's like, "Oh, you ever run hounds before?" And I was like, "No, I have not." He's like, "Oh, do you want to?" And I was like, "Fuck it, why not?" And I dropped my book and turn around, and go with this guy's walkers, and he was like, "Oh, you're deer hunting? Like, where are you sitting? Like, are you sitting under oaks or not?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know what kind of tree I'm sitting under. I'm just sitting under a tree." And he's like, "Do you even know the difference between white oak and red oak?" And I was like, "I didn't know there was a difference." And he's like, "Holy shit. All right." And so for like an entire night, probably till like 3 a.m, I walk around with this guy in Virginia, and he's pointing out the difference of trees. He knows where there's like 2 persimmon trees in this WMA. And
That's freaking awesome.
just like a wealth of knowledge. And
yeah, that's great.
I've always had a knack of like running into people and being open to experiences and learning from guys that are willing to teach. And so that was cool. And there's been a lot of little experiences like that along the way where it's like, man, this guy's, he just loves running his dogs for raccoons. Like he could give a shit about deer, but he's a woodsman through and through. And, then he comes to find out that I was a Redskins player. And like, he was like, didn't believe me because Redskins are in season. So he's like, why would you be down here in the woods if you're in? So I think he thought I was a little off, but he went and looked it up afterwards. I was like, holy shit, you are Redskins. And so it ended up being a cool experience for the both of us because he found out he taught a Redskins player the difference between a white oak and a red oak. And I thought it was cool as shit because I'm walking around with a houndsman in Virginia.
So did you harvest anything that fall, or what was the first, harvest that you had?
Yeah.
And when was it?
I ended up missing a buck that fall. He ended up being at like 37 yards, and I shot him off my first pin. Went right under his belly, crashed through leaves. I limped out of there, and as I'm leaving, there was a local with a house kind of on the corner of that WMA right off a ridge that he turned around and ran up, and that buck was strung up in this guy's front yard. And I was like, man, I just missed that buck. He turned around, ran right back to this guy, and got shot. And I think I'd been hunting long enough that it was rifle season by then, and I was still bow hunting. So it was a hard pill to swallow. But I think after that, I ended up shooting a doe. But it was like later in Ohio, it was kind of late season. And yeah, so it might have even been the next year, to be honest. I might not have. I might have ate tag soup. I did eat tag soup in Virginia that year, but the first deer was a doe. But same thing. I mean, I'm had to figure it out from there. Just what I was doing, and it was surprisingly intuitive. And I had eaten that doe like for 2 weeks straight, and felt great. But got sick of eating deer. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to go get Chipotle. Honestly, it felt like shit afterwards. Like, got a ton of inflammation in my knee and like wasn't feeling great. And prior to that experience, like I had considered Chipotle like as healthy food gets. And so it was kind of like what Charles Poliquin had said, like coming back to Hami of like, oh no, like it really makes a difference. So like, what is in what you're eating and who processed it and how fresh it was. And I didn't even have a vacuum sealer yet. I had just cut the meat up and like saran wrapped it and put it in the fridge.
So that first one you killed, you didn't take to a processor. You gutted it, deboned it. You did everything yourself on the very first one.
It looked like a barbarian did it. Like I literally just like cut slabs off and saran wrapped it and shoved it in the freezer and refrigerator. And I was staying like in a Airbnb in Ohio. But it was great. Like, I mean, I remember like, I think the first meal was like butter roasted cashews and just venison tenderloin. And I was like, this is the best thing ever.
That's cool. So that's your injury year. That's your fourth year. That was a contract year. And so then Washington, did they try to re-sign you, or did they just release you and you were a free agent the next year?
No,
or did they trade you? Well, it was a contract year, so
yeah, it was a contract year. They offered me like a vet minimum deal, which is kind of like a slap in the face, basically.
Yeah. And what do you think just from a professional standpoint, right now, I know you had an injury,
Yeah.
but you had 9 sacks the year before that. You were obviously, a huge part of what that defense was going to look like. Was it literally just okay, you're injured, and so we're not even going to consider the fact that you could potentially come back and be a viable contributor? Or had they drafted somebody? Like, what was their thought process, do you
Yeah.
think, in terms of them, just making kind of a crappy offer, knowing that you're going to go somewhere else probably?
Yeah. I mean, part of it was they had drafted Preston Smith in the second round, almost exactly where they drafted me. And so and it wasn't my coaches that were there anymore, right? Like I was already on my third coaching staff. And so for them to throw me a big contract essentially would make the decision makers that drafted Preston Smith like reflect poorly on that decision of like, yeah, we drafted this guy to be the opposite of Ryan Kerrigan, but we're going to pay this guy too. And now all of a sudden our draft, it's going to like cut into the meals that our draft choice is eating essentially.
You were on it was your third staff going into your fourth year?
Yeah, from a defensive standpoint.
Wow. Jeez, that was a lot of turnover.
Which was kind of a blessing for me because that Preston had gotten drafted and then his staff got let go. And then our position coach that came in, like, really didn't have a horse in the race at that point. Like, he had brought nobody
Right.
with him. And so it was kind of like, yeah, whoever's doing it is going to do it. Like, I don't care who it is. Like, one of you guys figure it out.
Yeah.
Which was a blessing for me going into my third season because he was like, dude, this kid's freaking, he's hot right now. Like, why would I take him out? So he kind of ended up making this like 3-man rotation with me, Preston, and Kerrigan. And I had like 40%, maybe not that much, but like 30% less snaps than both those guys. But production was through the roof. And so they couldn't not play me that year. But then having 9 sacks, they're like, well, what do we do now? Like, do we pay the non-starter more than we're paying our starters because his production is there or not? And they had already like, they weren't super great with like some really big veterans that were like great. I mean, like Alfred Morris was a team captain. He was like number 1 on the charity board for like giving back to the community. He was a pro bowler. And like they offered him a rookie minimum deal and then sent him to Dallas, their rival. So it was like, if they did that to Alfred, like they're not going to do shit for me for sure.
Yeah. So you went to the Bills the next year then, right?
Yeah. And I just told this story earlier, and I'm sure you or somebody would appreciate it. But the Patriots actually came after me first, which
okay,
rare for the Patriots to do. And it was a decent contract for them as well. They're usually lower than everyone. And then Tampa came in, and Tampa and Buffalo got into a bidding war. For me, and just like life choices and what was happening and everything, I felt like Buffalo was going to give me the best chance for just, I don't know, quality of life and making my relationship work and not losing my soul to the NFL. But that being said, I had 3 teams, and the next year, the Patriots won the Super Bowl with Brady, and then the following year, Brady goes to Tampa and wins the Super Bowl. And I went to Buffalo, so I had about two out of 3 options to have a Super Bowl ring if I would have done either other choice, but that'd be tough to predict that future.
So you had 3 years there. Were they all healthy?
Yeah, the first year was tough. I had a lot of compensation injuries coming off the ACL. It was a brute. I had somebody like fall into my knee, I think that year too, and tore my MCL on my right leg. But I basically played through it. I mean, I sat out a bye week and then one more week, and I think it was like 10% of it was still attached, but I didn't want to get labeled as injury prone, so I just rubbed some dirt on that one. And then, I mean, there were always little injuries that come up. I have like a 1,300-page injury report, but I don't think I missed any games other than the big knee and a game or 2 for the right MCL.
So you played there 3 seasons, and then was like, what was it that ultimately, did you make the choice that the contracts that were available coming out of that, out of your
Yeah.
7th year just wasn't worth what it was costing your body to keep going? Or what was the decision making process for you to be like, okay, this is, I'm kind of done at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some good teammates over the years, Lee Smith being one of them, but he kind of said like, hey, you know, your contract needs to percentage wise like change your net worth at this point in your career by this much in order to make the injuries that come with it worth it at this point. Like, unless you just really love the game and don't want to do anything else and aren't ready to bite that bullet, like, you're not going to take a vet minimum deal at that point in your contract. And Buffalo had kind of screwed with me my last year, kind of going into my contract year a little bit, to where on the outside looking in, people didn't really know what was going on. And so I would have probably had to sign like a prove it 1 year deal. Now there were teams calling, like the Cardinals called, Atlanta called. So that was really a blessing for my ego, being like, oh, I could still play. Like, teams are calling if I really wanted to. But it was also the first year of COVID was my last year playing, and then I was going into the second year of COVID. So the teams were all still mandating vaccines, and I don't care really how anyone feels about it, but it was a great scapegoat for me at the time to be like, I'm not participating in this. And it was kind of like a blessing, because it felt like I wasn't quitting football, or like, oh yeah, I'm just stepping away because I'm done. It was like, no, I'm not getting the vaccine, so I'll play if somebody calls and doesn't care, but otherwise, don't worry about it.
Was that pretty much was the league mandating that, or was that a team decision across like the board?
It was a league mandate, and so
Okay.
the rules were spelled out. At least the first year was, if you're on a team, you can't be required to get the vaccine because you're already on a team.
Mm-hmm.
And you go into free agency, they essentially required it to get back on a team, which didn't really make a lot of sense, because it's like, well, I already played on a team for an entire year of COVID, and that was fine. So now to go on a new team, it has to be mandated.
Well, name a COVID rule that made sense.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, most of them were ridiculously stupid to begin with. So
yeah, wearing masks to bench press, but then we can put football helmets on and spit in each other's faces.
The thing that I used to find like just insane, and this is just normal life, right? But you'd go into a restaurant and they'd make you wear your mask to the table, but then you could take it off when you sat down, and you had all these people like around you, and you're sitting there shoveling food in your mouth for an hour, but you had to wear it as you walked in. Just like, none of it made sense. Hilarious. So it was a good exit for you.
Yeah, no, it was a good exit. It was a blessing too, because everyone was working from home. People were losing, and so like for me to be at home being like, oh, I don't have a work right now. I'm like, oh, neither does my cousin or sister or this person. So like, it's fine.
And you're not married yet, right? Or are you?
Yeah, no, I'm married. My wife's here in Michigan, where I moved after Buffalo.
Okay. So when did you really start? Like, I know that your 4th year in Washington was that first kind of year figuring out in the woods. Like, when did you really start saying, this is something I'm going to really make a huge part of my life?
Yeah. I had some great teammates in Washington, Colt McCoy being one of them, and he'd invited a posse of us, of Redskins, to come down to Texas and hunt with him pretty early. I mean, that was probably 2017 or maybe our 18, our first year down there. And he like went big, like had a close family friend that invited us to go hunt on a spot in the King Ranch that has like free ranging Neil guy and unbelievable whitetail. And so to go from like limping around Virginia with a bow to like the King Ranch in Texas,
a target rich environment. Yeah, that's an insane opportunity.
Yeah. And so my first morning, I was sitting by myself in a blind, and it was kind of like, okay, the rule is you can shoot mature whitetail and any Neil guy or hog that come by. And so it was hard still, like, especially jumping. Even now, I'm terrible at aging Texas deer just compared to everywhere. But
they're so big, man. I mean, a 2.5-year-old Texas deer is like, you'd see it out in the woods and you'd be like, oh, that's a 5-year-old.
Yeah,
Like they're just
yeah,
huge.
exactly. And they have smaller bodies. Like you compare
Yeah.
to like a, Ohio, PA, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just throws you off. And
Yeah.
but,
Genetically, they're different.
yeah, the very first morning I sent Colt a video of a deer and he's like, oh, that's a mature deer, dude. That's a perfect shooter. So I shoot him. I'm sitting there like looking at this sunrise, like, man, what an awesome morning. And then a Nilgai bull comes cruising across the Sendero and I shoot him. And I'm just sitting there like with 2 Sendero cuts, one here, and I have a Nilgai bull down here and a whitetail buck down here. And this is after like probably putting hundreds of hours of like walking and limping and driving through Virginia public land. So I was just like, wow, what a difference here. But there was a kind of like a vaquero cowboy that family grew up on the ranch. That's kind of like more or less like born into the position of ranch management there. His name is Ram. He's an awesome dude, but I mean, he grew up tracking and gutting animals and taking care of ranch stuff, and is like as South Texas as it gets. So to be able to follow him around and learn from him and watch him bring back animals and hang it up and like, and we all like to do our own stuff. So we're like, all right, teach me how to do this, Ram. And so that was like, that took me from like very green to like, here's someone that's like better with a knife than anyone you'll see teaching you real quick. And like, we'll video him doing it and can, would look back on it the first year of like, what would Ram do here? And then since then, it's like I've fit probably 10 lifetimes in 3 years and being able to watch people from all over like, all right, well, how does this guy do it? How does this guy do it? And kind of take what I like, take what I don't like. There was a guy in Utah and his thing was like after, he cuts up and processes everything and the animals kind of all the pieces are still there. He'll take a grate of grass and put it on the ribs kind of as one final meal for the animal to make its last journey and have the strength to do that and say thanks and just little things like that you just pick up from people from all over, whether it's like how to respect the animal or how to handle it or how they would, cut this piece or that piece. And I've just kind of been like a sponge, I guess.
Has anybody that you've been around, have you picked up any trick or anything that you found to be effective in terms of reducing the gaminess of the meat, especially when it comes to like venison? Whether it's, the way it's prepared, whether it's the way that, how quickly you get to it or whether it's, how you age it or whatever. Is there anything that you've picked up there that you think is that makes a really big difference?
I think probably getting the guts out of it for starters. I mean, it depends on the temperature too, but like the quicker you can cool the meat, the ultimately the better. Like chilling meat and keeping meat dry are like across the board for any species is going to make how well that animal eats dramatically different. I would also say like there could be a difference between like the stress of an animal versus like, all right, if you shot it and its back hip first and then you trailed it for 4 miles and then you shoot it again and then coyotes eat it for half a night, like that versus like, oh, here's a clean like double lung pass through. This animal died in 45 seconds. Like it didn't have a lot of stress, or there was no blood left in it. But Andy Moakel, I don't know if you met him at any of the Winter Strong.
Yeah, I actually had him on the podcast a few months ago. Great guy.
Yeah. So I would say the flip flop method. Like, I mean,
do you use that a lot when you cook?
He sent me the stuff. We'll use like all of the seasoning and it's most times just me and my wife, so it'd be hard to be like, all right, we're gonna flip this tonight.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Eat fast, honey. I got a minute and a half, and it's coming over. We're getting more.
But for like a party setting, like he flip flopped at our wedding, and I mean, no one would have been any wiser had we not told them what it was. Like it was like beef to them. And for me, it's really just like, as far as preparation, like it's just a cast iron with butter, minced garlic, Worcestershire sauce, and then like a steak seasoning. And I mean, anyone that has eaten at my house is like, what is this? What is this? What is this? And they couldn't tell you if it was a deer, elk, or cow. I mean, they really don't know. You put enough butter in there, especially. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some old wise tale tricks to get gaminess out, but I'm like very anal about taking care of my meat and processing it. And not once have I ever been like, oh, this tastes like a deer. This is gamey. So I think it's probably a little warmer down there for you guys longer, which might be something to combat. But yeah.
What's your favorite animal to hunt?
Oh, that's a tough one. I really enjoy elk, probably because I don't get to do it as much as some of the other things, or because it's in such bigger country, or because it's kind of like the species I grew up with in Arizona. But certain times of year, like, I mean, I love sitting in a tree, saddle hunting for whitetail too. Like, I've passed a lot of whitetail, like just waiting for a more mature one or whatever, and to get from the point of limping around Virginia with a bow, just begging to get close enough to something to where I'm like in a tree passing deer that are walking underneath me that, you could drop something and hit, is like a cool place to get to as an outdoorsman that's like kind of DIY, self-taught a bit.
Well, I know Michigan's got the highest number of bow hunters in the entire country, right? Like so do you hunt Michigan a lot, or do you tend to like do more travel hunting and then hunt Michigan like when you can? But that's like, where's your focus during whitetail season?
Yeah, I've been almost exclusively traveling. Like I'm almost ashamed of how little I've hunted Michigan living here, but we live like in a state park, and I've hunted it and had a couple young deer kind of pass under me that most people probably shoot here, but it's like, it's hard to find a good spot and then hunting season not show up and there be 3 tree stands pop up in it. Like, it is just unbelievable the amount of outdoorsmen here that that pressure the woods. Like, even at night, I was trying to coyote hunt and saw deer like come into the field, and it'd be like the middle of the night and these deer are creeping through the field like they're still being hunted. And so it's just like they almost never relax here, which is just insane. But
it's very different, isn't it? Like South Carolina is similar, right? Our deer are really small, so they're not like any kind of a prize compared to Midwestern deer, but they're so twitchy because we don't have, like, most of the state doesn't have like bow season's maybe 15 days long in some parts of the state, and in the other part of the state there's no bow season. They're not in and out of gun seasons. It's like once they start shooting, they're getting shot at the entire year.
For sure.
So they're really hard to hunt here. So I've kind of done, like, I've spent a lot of time trying to hunt South Carolina, but like you said, when I go up to Missouri or Illinois, they're just not switched on the same way. They just kind of are much more casual in the way they're moving.
Yeah, no, it's cool to see. Like, that's probably been the biggest blessing, is just being able to travel to so many different places and hunt same animals or different animals and see the behavior change, or see maybe behavior similarities between mature males of the species, or like how jumpy deer are here, how much you can get away with in maybe like Texas or somewhere else. And so it's been fun to see. Like, it makes you a fairly like well-rounded outdoorsman to hunt and all over.
Yeah, the other thing I've found is that for someone who's, and I know you've got a young child, but I've kind of found, for me, it's easier to go somewhere and know I'm going to hunt hard for 5 days or 7 days because I've taken that time and set it aside, versus trying to get out, in the evening for, okay, hey, it's the rut here, which I haven't actually hunted the rut here because I'm always up in Illinois or whatever. But to me, it's easier to do that than to try to get out and be effective, but not get out enough to be effective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to think about it too. I mean, so much like every time I'm home, I'm just looking at all the remodeling projects or
Yeah.
yard or dead tree or poison ivy or, there's something to do here or work on. And if I'm committing, 7 days in Idaho, it's like there's nothing
That's all you're doing.
to do. So might as well commit to it.
Okay. Well, listen, I've had you for a long time, which it's been a great conversation. The thing that I've really found interesting on top of all this stuff is how later in life you kind of started doing the hunting thing. So if you had to give one piece of advice to someone who is either starting or someone who's pretty darn new, what would it be?
Everyone hates this, but it'd probably be the same advice I'd give to a kid in college now trying to figure out how to earn a starting role. And it's just like hard work and persistence. If you kind of lock in on something that you want to do, and it's like whether you want a deer or you want an elk or you want this or that, like I guarantee you, if you find elk sign or elk scat or a rub tree and you sit there and you're willing to sit there long enough, like you're going to have an opportunity to have success. And it's not a real flashy answer, but humans have been killing animals for a really long time. And it's one of those things that I kind of think like persistence pays off. You're either going to learn something you were doing wrong real quick when you get winded or the thermals change or something, or you might get lucky and be like, all right, why did I get lucky in this situation? And then just to add to that too, I would say that processing your own animals is super rewarding, and it's not as hard as you think it's going to be. The first time you do it and you pull an animal apart, like there's lines that separate the muscles and that almost are telling you kind of where to follow with your knife, and there's a million videos too, but no one cares more about your meat than you do. I think industry standards for most processors is to get somebody back 61% of their meat. And as much time and money and effort as I put into harvesting an animal, to get 61% of the meat back almost makes me want to throw up. So I would say, like, if you take pride in your meat and you want to know who's touched it and it's that it's your meat, then I wouldn't be overly intimidated to try and cut it up yourself and vacuum seal it and stuff, because it definitely, is a labor of love.
That's good advice, man. I appreciate you jumping on with us, brother. Where, if people want to follow you and pay attention to what you're doing out there chasing critters, where do they follow you?
I don't post a ton, but I do post on Instagram. It's usually a late post than an on time post, but you guys can check me out there. Just my name. Maybe someday.
Yeah, Trent Murphy.
Yeah, Trent Murphy. There might be a period between Trent and Murphy, and then someday I might do the YouTube route or something. But I've been battling with that decision. But yeah, no.
I think you're doing it the right way.
Yeah,
honestly, it's like I've kind of done the same thing just because I've got the podcast and I've been like, do I film this stuff or whatever? And I don't know. I think and everyone's got to make their own decision. But I think the minute you start doing that, at least for me, like I've actually processed it in my head. Like, okay, if I was out there filming this, what would I be doing?
Yeah.
And for me, going out there, even if I'm not harvesting something, is an escape from what I do every day. And I don't know that I would feel that way if I were trying to film stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. I have enough family and friends that I think are very interested in what I do and how I can spend so much time alone on a mountain or whatever. From that standpoint, it would be interesting to be like, all right, I can piece together a little video.
Yeah.
Because if you're quiet and alone and spend enough time in the mountains, like you see.
That's true. You could be doing it while you're there.
And so some of those would be cool to share, but then at the same time, like, maybe you don't see that black bear from 10 feet away if you have a camera, that you're trying to worry about or something, but maybe you do. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if you do, it'll be good stuff to watch. Appreciate you jumping on. Congratulations to you and your wife on your newborn. Enjoy it. It's a great time, man. It's a great time. Thanks for being here, Trent.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, brother.